and people don't probably use the term love that often in leadership, but it is a lot easier if you have something you like or love about the people that you're working with and leading, because the benefit of the doubt then plays in and you get a little bit more towards the why something is happening or challenges that they're having. And I feel like, you get back to, when it comes to even leadership and people development, more of the treating of like curing things versus just treating symptoms. So if you can get all the way back to what the real impediment or challenge is, then I think you can have, unlock like so much more potential.
Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. This is a show for men and women in the workplace who want to move from the predictable to the potent. This is your weekly dose of inspiration with an edge. I talk with CEOs and shamans, sports marketing executives and therapists. All of us are like-minded thinkers and doers who tell stories, share wisdom, and challenge each other to have the best life possible inside and outside the office. Welcome to your Warrior Conversation. Hey everybody, it's Jeannie. Thanks so much for joining me at the Warriors at Work show. Today, I sat down with one of my favorite people. I met her over a decade ago, Lauren Jensen. She's a senior executive at Prudential. And what we decided to do in this conversation is talk about redefining leadership. We had been reflecting a lot over what life has been like for all of us in the business world the last couple of years and how it's challenged leaders on completely different levels. So we talk about leadership through her experience. She takes us through her leadership journey. We also talk about what are some of the challenges that leaders are facing today, strengths and gaps. But we also talked about the power of what she calls extreme transparency. Really talking from the heart, and how this has been a crucial part of her career brand and her career evolution. We also talk about mental health, how it's playing a role in leading and managing. Whether you are a 30-year veteran in an organization, leading an organization, or you're new in your career, this is a different type of leadership conversation. We really talk about things like authenticity and heart and living your brand in a very authentic and heartfelt way. So I am delighted to bring to you Lauren Jensen. Enjoy. Welcome to Warriors at Work, lady. We have been talking about this interview for so long. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
I am such a fangirl, Jeannie. Like, I've been waiting forever to even be asked. So this is going to be epic. I can't wait. Thank you for having me.
Well, to have a conversation about leadership and authenticity with you is like, it's the Mac Daddy of all people to have this conversation with. I've just been a part of your career journey for over a decade. So I've had a front row seat to so much of your transformation. And where I wanted to start today is I pulled off some snippets from a bio. Mm-hmm. And it just brings a huge smile on my face as I read them, because I want you to think about how you would describe yourself after I read these things. So, experienced business executive, strong consultative approach, skilled in strategy, business transformation, which is definitely what I know you for, enterprise communication, which is going across one of the largest organizations in the world, leadership and culture change advocate would be a word I'd put in there, account management. And here's what I love: focus on creating the next generation of meaningful customer experiences at Prudential. Now, all of those things, of course, are true, right? That's your professional profile. But I want you to take a step back and tell us who you are. Who is Lauren Jensen?
So you're starting with the easy question. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So that's LinkedIn Lauren. So I should add marketing to that list because it sounds really, really fabulous. But I want to be super real because that's how you guys do this here at Warriors at Work. So what how I would describe myself really truly is a lifelong recovering pleaser, an oldest daughter of baby boomers with a work ethic and a moral compass that probably rivals any other. I would say I'm probably doing it right now, overthinking underdog who surpassed everyone's expectations, including my own, of what I was capable of achieving in my career. And now I'm addicted to it. Like, I want to win. I want to hustle. I have this insatiable desire to invest in others the way that I feel like I've been invested in. That's more who I am. And I probably thought about like how to answer this question a bit in terms of because I like the memes and the quotes and the things that like get you in those micro moments through to the next sort of inspiration that you need to keep going. And I saw that Taylor Swift, yes, Taylor Swift, once said that she's fueled by the fear of being average. And I have never related to anything more in my life. I am 100% now fueled by the fear of being average and wanting to be seen and worthy. And I'm exhausted, but that is me.
Has anybody ever told you you're average?
I think I just always identified as average because I was an average student. I was an average athlete. I was an average, had friends with everybody, but there was nothing particularly special or unique in my background. And so for those reasons, there would have never been necessarily an indicator. It's not that I don't have a wonderful, supportive network of friends and family who aren't thrilled and supportive of where I've arrived, but I don't think anyone could have plotted that course, myself included. So yeah, I was pretty average on paper.
Wow. That's so fascinating. When I think of you, when I recall any conversations I've ever had, you are the farthest thing from average ever. You're always thinking about what's possible, what have you not considered, and you have this beautiful way, and we're going to hear this in some of the things that you're going to talk about here. You have this beautiful way of landing a very direct message with a ton of compassion and care.
Takes one to know one.
Yeah, well, sometimes not exactly this. I don't have the softest landing. Well, let's talk about.
But let me just comment just real quick, because even this conversation is quite uncomfortable for me from the perspective of that is how I identify, is constantly hustling and grinding because I want to overcome that self-imposed notion of being average. And so thank you for saying what you said, but really most of that is fueled for me out of that, underdog sort of recovering pleaser dynamic, because I go into every interaction trying to figure out what does this person, individual, meeting, client, or team member that works for me need to get out of this interaction to feel satisfied, to feel like it was successful. That's literally how I'm just like wired as a person. And unfortunately, it's not so great in parenting because the kids can take advantage of that.
They sniff it out. Well, take us back to the beginning parts of your career. So think about, your whole leadership arc here. Mm-hmm. Describe what you understood leadership to be when you first began.
So I started at Prudential as an intern at a school to basically pay for my share in the beach house. Like, that was my motivation at that point. There wasn't, another situation or aspiration out there. So I really navigated my career at Prudential from intern all the way through to vice president, having never led a team. I saw a lot of leaders around me, but I was always an independent contributor. I don't recommend that, by the way. I was really ill prepared for when the time came to lead people, what that meant, and even the amount of pressure it puts on leaders. So for me, when I looked outwardly, leaders to me coming up through my career were people who were always right. They knew the answer. They seemed smart. They made all the decisions. They had a lot of people who worked for them, and they were, to me, sort of boring and maybe wore suits. Like, that was my whole perspective of leadership, really.
And hierarchical.
Very.
I had a very hierarchical understanding of, if you get this title, that means this is your level of authority. And obviously That ain't true. So talk to us about what leadership is to you today.
Yeah.
What's it been like for you? Thinking about particularly the last 2 years or 3 years now.
It's funny because I've been saying this a lot to my teams lately because now I have the opportunity to lead leaders and leaders of large teams, which is very different than, managing work and leading people. It's sort of like that next level evolution. And I try to keep it really, really basic. And I think you just need to show up and be the leader that you wish you had. And in this moment, that is a very tall order. It's a very simple concept, like be the leader you wish you had. But it's very complex because of the environment that we've navigated with the pandemic and all of this blurring of work and life and mental health. And there's a lot of complexity. So it's easy to say, try to be that person, and it's a lot harder to execute on. But I think now we're in a world where leadership is no longer ordained or hierarchical. It's really, cultivated and earned. And I've often said, even for my own career, I'm at the place now where I would much more forensically choose my next boss versus my next opportunity or position, because I feel like I could go to different industries, I could learn a lot of different things, but who I work for and their ability to create like psychological security so I can take risks and make decisions and be effective is, to me, I've experienced that. And now, like I said, I'm like an addict. I would never go back. That's what leadership is to me today.
Well, tell us a story where you or somebody on your team was the leader they wish they had.
Oh, that's such a good question. You know what? I've actually been walking such an interesting journey with someone who came up in one of our lines of business that was very hierarchical. The culture was sort of, really intense in terms of just like pace setting and personal lives sort of irrelevant to your outcomes at work, and just a real like hard driving culture. And so she came to my team in a very technical role, in a technology position, which suited her style and personality coming up through the ranks, but now is in a pretty senior leadership position and inheriting a lot of our technology teams. And so that more black and white style, like traditionally worked okay in this more technical environment. I also have operations teams, which tend to go more in the customer and feeling and, empathy route, but the technology teams, they can be a little bit more black and white. And she really struggled actually with kind of transitioning from her technical expertise into leading these teams that we had, and they're run in an agile format. So it's very much espousing servant leadership. And it's just like, Lauren, I can't thrive in this environment. I'm not used to getting kudos. I'm not used to getting, support. I'm not used to getting resources. And I just kept saying, like, but why would you want to perpetuate? I understand you had 20 years of this way of working, but why would you want to perpetuate that when you have the opportunity now as this leader of this organization who's espousing to be about servant leadership and agility to not be the leader that you wish you had? Huge, I mean, she couldn't argue with it because it was sort of logic. Like, yeah, why wouldn't I do that? But it was just because the training and the experience, when you draw on your experiences, and she had not experienced that before. So that's been such a fascinating evolution to watch, and it's working. So I'm just so excited when I get to see, like this multiplier effect, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you know what the next question I was thinking about as you were describing that story is like, obviously everybody's being tested like they've never been tested before. And there's some extraordinary strengths that are coming to the surface, but then there's also some gaps, right, that we're noticing. So from your perspective, what are you noticing that leaders are doing really, really well? And what are you noticing things that they need to focus more in on?
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit about this one because I think it's a little bit reminiscent of sort of the timing of some of my success too, is because I think this time that we're in right now has called for different skills. So some of us have had them all along, but they maybe just weren't called on, like we weren't pulled off the bench. But right now with the pandemic, I see leaders who have, strong candor, vulnerability, empathy, judgment, like decisiveness,
Mm.
humanity and humility. Like we were immersed in this just very real situation over the last 2 years that there was no playbook for. So it doesn't matter how many years of training or how many actuarial tests you've passed. You either showed up and you could handle folks with kids on their laps, homeschooling and also working, or you couldn't. And how were you going to be tested in that moment to show up differently? So I see the people who, and in corporate too, you often espouse a lot of these values because they're buzzwords and because that's, what leadership is defined to be in certain eras, but it doesn't mean you actually can practically execute on it. And I think that's where I'm seeing the difference. There's a lot of people espousing the values and using the buzzwords, but I think the real game changers are the ones who are just being immersively real themselves and role modeling, like, well, we're asking you to stop work and we're asking you to fail fast. But if nobody has ever seen what that looks like before, or someone who did it and lived to tell about it,
Yeah.
that's where I see the game changing right now.
Yeah. Well, what about yourself? What about assessing your own strengths and areas of focus for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's so uncomfortable for me to talk about myself, but I will if it means that people may like kind of sympathize with it a little bit. I would say for me, I'm working on trying to help everyone that I interact with decipher the difference between urgent and important. I mean, there's so many things written about that, but I think right now in this situation where between personal and professional, you're just drinking from a fire hose, you have to be able to like really prioritize on the fly the difference between urgent and important and be triaging that almost like an ER, like an emergency room all day long, so that you could stop the bleeding where you really need to. And then my personal pivot, as I sort of alluded to, has been moving to leading leaders and helping those folks again lean into some of these principles which have happened to work for me. So not being afraid to take risks, to fail, to recover, to take time out. I have this, I'm very known for my out of office messages because I put like literally what I'm doing, not just like some please, call my assistant and whatever else. I'm like, text me if this happens. And I'm very real about what I'm doing and when I'll get back to you, because I just think it allows everyone else to let their guard down a little bit more. And then you just have much more real interactions. And I find out, even compared to some of my peers, I find out sooner when something is going awry because people are just less afraid to tell me the truth or be honest. And then we're in a much better position to intervene than we would be if something compounds over a long period of time. So I think there's real business value in coming across this way, not just because you're more likable or more relatable.
Did you learn that, or was that like, did you receive that coaching or mentoring? Like, how did you know that is something that was natural to you, but also would have a very positive trickle effect to everyone around you?
Yeah. I would say I've known for years, as I'm sure many people listening and watching know, that we're supposed to be authentic, right? Everyone knows all about authenticity, and that's where leadership is, and everyone needs to. The problem with that is when you actually don't know who you are. So you can't really be your authentic self if you're not in touch with what that actually means. And I think for a myriad of reasons, it's really easy when you live in a high pressure, fast paced environment to look everywhere else except for here. And so I would just simply say that I had to do the work across so many spectrums to get to, so I want to be authentic because that's, more relatable and it drives high performing teams. So what would I look like, or what would it feel like if I showed up authentic? And then I had to do like probably 4 years and counting in perpetuity of work to really think about what that is, which is what I was sort of sharing even in the description of who I am, like that is who I am. I've been called ambitious. I'm like, yeah, I'm not ambitious. I just really am a pleaser. And so I always want to know what's going to make the situation have the most positive outcome. And so you can get tagged with other people's perceptions of what you are authentically. But I think you have to really like do the work, and it's scary stuff. It's like digging into your core values and your core belief systems. And I'm on a journey. Like I'm not even close to where this journey ends. But I think yes, coaching is always like be authentic, but figuring out what that means is a real personal labor of love, I think.
Has the term like being a pleaser in terms of your leadership brand ever gotten in the way or held you back?
Oh, it's such a good question, because I was just asked for my recent promotion that I have been working for a really long time. I was so excited about it. It was a really, really big achievement. And I had to go through the gauntlet of senior executive, discussions to achieve it. And the parting words of one of our executive leadership members was, great conversation, really, interesting discussion. I said, well, how did I do? Because I knew it was like I knew it was an interview. And he said, I don't want you to answer this, but I just want you to think about it. Have you ever said no to anyone in a leadership position before? And the good news was I had a good example, but it had only been in the last like 3 or 4 years. It was a very recent example. It's like, that wasn't who I was long term. And I had someone else point out to me, a mentor of mine, who picked up on this right away. He said, this is going to be interesting now to see you at this next level, because you're driven by harmony and our environment up here is driven by discord.
Wow. Wow. Oh my goodness.
And it was right. And so I'm still freaking out about that one and trying to figure out like, can I be about harmony and still operate at this level? I don't know.
And how's that going?
I'm getting slightly less harmonious when it counts. But I actually think it's like the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinta, it's like you don't have being nice and being effective or like not mutually exclusive concepts. So I'm trying to figure out my lane here. I don't think you necessarily have to be harmonious or focused on discord.
Right.
I'm going to try to have it be more like a dial than a switch, and I'll try to pick my spots.
Yeah, it's not an either or. It's a yes and I like that, picking your place too. So you said something to me when we were preparing for this that I want to call out, which you're starting to touch on, is this idea of extreme transparency. Yeah. Say more.
I mean,
because the term transparency gets thrown around so much. Like, you need to be transparent. You need to speak from the heart. But you weren't saying it like that. What you were talking about is like, there's no more filters. There's this inherent need to just clear the way so we get to the root of things a lot faster. That's how I interpreted it. Yeah. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about it.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about it under the guise that I am being a bit of an imposter right now, because what extreme transparency meant for me over the last 2 years, we'll just talk about the pandemic, because I think that's where we went to like DEFCON 1 implosion of personal, professional, all going together, and everyone, it was almost like we were united against a common enemy again, like 9/11 with the pandemic. I think we just went to a different place. But I was showing up with, half homeschooling my kids, my hair in a messy bun, like not this today. I mean, I did my hair, I put some makeup on. I still have my yoga pants on. You can't see that, but like I did show up. I showed up today. So I'm a little bit of an imposter in terms of the extreme transparency thing, but you could ask anyone on my team. The fact that I was like addicted to Starbucks, always had one in my hand in every meeting that we're on Zoom. And, again, kids, dogs, the whole thing. it put them at ease because they were trying so hard to keep up this facade of expectation that we're professional at all times and we raise our hand on the little Zoom button. And so anytime I would be like, yeah, I know we're supposed to raise our hands. Like, I can't even find the button right now. People would be like, okay, I have permission to be a real human being. And I think it's driven followership and loyalty, and also just taking that one variable out of the equation by me just being very real. Some people think it's a little oversharey, and I'm sure I've gotten judged on it because I do work in a very traditional corporate environment. But I think the timing is now, like carpe diem. Like, why not now? And again, it's a little bit of the byproduct, I think, of the authenticity thing. It's like that actually is who I am. So when I do this stuff, it is just me trying to fit in versus because I was going to go back to this hair color and not do, and everyone was like, and I was like, that's really off brand because I've done this work to be me. And now I'm going to revert back just because we're going back into the office sometimes. Like that's so inauthentic. So I'm struggling with it. I guess that's my answer. Like I'm about it. I love this notion of just being fully transparent, but how does that show up in a way that isn't super judgy and challenging? I don't know.
Well, it also is a perfect segue into the next thing that I was thinking about is how mental health is playing a part in management leadership, particularly in a senior position that I know you're in, where you have a big scope and a lot of influence. I'm just curious, give us your take on how mental health is playing out.
Yeah, I think it's a struggle because there's a lot of, look, there's a lot of stigmas with a lot of things, but there's a lot of stigmas, I think, associated with mental health. And I have had a lot of firsthand experience in my personal life, as well as then kind of knowing also sometimes what to look for from a workplace perspective. And I think I had shared with you, I view mental like wellness as a spectrum similar to neurodiversity or sexuality. It's not like I'm either mentally well today or I'm not mentally well tomorrow. Like I do think it's a spectrum that goes, across at all times. So it's like table stakes sort of thing that we don't seem to acknowledge, to me, in the same way that we do like even when you join a call, like the weather or how much sleep did you get last night or what did you do this weekend? Like to me, it's that much of a presence in our life. Like how are we taking care of ourselves, and are we having a resilient day? Are we having a struggle like the other things going on? And having that awareness and then figuring out ways to drive, I think, like macro things you could do, which, a company like mine has a lot of resources and really formal things that you can do, and therapy, and you can life coaching and all these great resources. I think that's sort of like a macro solution. And then I think a micro solution to wherever you might be on the spectrum of wellness on that given day is just your network and having those people, whether it's like your sort of like work wife or your work bestie or whoever these people are that are just a little bit more in tune to what's going on with you, and having the ability to either, vent and recover or get a little extra boost of confidence, or even say today, like, I'm just off today. Like today, I'm not my best self. It doesn't have to be detailed. It doesn't have to be like deeply, I'm pouring all my stuff out on the table, but just the ability to say like, yeah, I'm not at my best today. And that's where I think the stigma comes in around mental health, because the assumption is, you're on medicine, you're going to therapy, you're having an intervention. Like, I don't see it that way. I see it as just another aspect of well-being, like exercise, sleep, and other things that we have to take care of and be attuned to operate, in our lives.
I love that. And it's very integrated into our lives. It's not like, oh, that's mental health. Let me move over to the mental health conversation. No, it's a part of your existence. It's every day. I mean, I use that term a lot as I'm not at my best, having to make some tough decisions. I need to slow this down. I'm not going to do this today. I'm going to do this another time. And just even, I think I learned this from a therapist early on, particularly in the pandemic, where she had this term where she said, naming wherever you are normalizes it. So there's tremendous power. And I think there's also, from a neuroscience standpoint, why that's powerful. But just naming it and saying it also humanizes you, particularly in business interactions where we don't have to be robotic and I have to show up perfect and I have to deliver and I have to execute and all the competency languages. It'd be kind of cool if we had more mental health oriented competency languages that we measure ourselves against. But I guess that's another conversation we could have time.
Well, there's lots of hope for the future because I do
Yeah.
believe that. And when I see even the things that my kids are getting out of being in therapy at different given situations, I believe that in the future, we need that more integrated into subjects in school, not that dissimilar to how they learn math, science, and others. Coping mechanisms. There's so many tools around managing anxiety and depression, which, let's face it, everybody has faced at some point in their lives. So painting any of that with a stigma is baloney. Like everyone has had situational anxiety and situational depression. And so forget the bigger spectrum, mental health challenges. Those are just table stakes, and people need to learn good mental wellness hygiene to be able to operate as humans and adults in this world is my, I guess, 2 cents there.
Amen, sister. Amen. 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 I am curious. Let's talk about Lauren for a minute. Tell us what is important to Lauren when you think about yourself, the future that you want to influence. Tell us what you see and what's going to be most important to you.
Yeah. So I thought about this question a little bit. I was like, well, if you asked anyone else who knows Lauren, they would be like, everything is important to Lauren because I do lots of detail. I care about details. And I think you get to certain levels sometimes in your personal and professional life where you sort of stop the details. And I don't know, I'm still very into why is that? Could we fix, we do this a lot in, I don't know, in corporate, maybe everywhere, but we try to address all the symptoms versus cure the disease. I'm very focused on how do we get back to curing, why is that actually happening? Not let's just fix all the little tentacles of what happened. And so so a lot of details are very important to me, but I think the number one thing that's probably the most important to me, which is difficult, it's complex, is I really care about doing the right thing by people. So my daughter's preschool teacher called it, she's very justice oriented. And that was the first time I was like, bing, that is me. I want justice for everything from, full blown racial equity to the wrong person was in the meeting who didn't do the work and you should be the spokesperson for your work. And I literally care about all of it almost equally. So it can be debilitating at times to be that justice oriented, I guess. That's what I'm working on.
You know what it made me realize too, and we've talked about how love might play a role in the workplace, and even just saying the word and then embodying it in various conversations and interactions and caring so deeply about something and having it just reminded me of that word is, love is the ultimate equalizer, if you will.
Yeah. So I think it's funny because I learned a lot early on in my relationships around the notion of love languages. I know people have heard about that before, but I try to apply that to people at work because I do work with a lot of this can come as no surprise to anyone. I'm in a financial services company, but I interact with a lot of people who are not like me. So I have to find what's unique in them and also fascinating and fall in love with it because the pleaser in me wants to understand it. So it comes a little bit naturally to me. I know it's probably much harder for others and people don't probably use the term love that often in leadership, but it is a lot easier if you have something you like or love about the people that you're working with and leading, because the benefit of the doubt then plays in and you get a little bit more towards the why something is happening or challenges that they're having. And I feel like, yeah, you get back to, when it comes to even leadership and people development, more of the treating of like curing things versus just treating symptoms. So if you can get all the way back to what the real impediment or challenge is, then I think you can have, unlock like so much more potential.
Mm. Get to the root of the real impediment, I think, is
Yeah.
really crucial to what you just said. And then being ridiculously curious until you get to the root of it, which often I find is we go so far and I'm like, oh, that's enough. We got enough. It's almost like how we listen too. You ever notice this? People will listen until they get just enough information. And then they're like, yeah, I'm just waiting for you to stop talking so I can give you the answer. Instead of saying, wait a second, what else? What else? What else? It's just being like unbelievably curious. I love that. Love that. Love that. I would love to see us do that more often. So here's my final question for you, my rock star friend. Who are you following and admiring, and why?
Yeah. I think this one's going to be maybe a little anticlimactic, because I feel like there's always these great this is like one of my pet peeves in corporate America, is like the icebreaker, or if you were going to have dinner on an island with one person, who would it be? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so uninteresting. Like, I don't even know how to answer these questions and make it sound so smart and like phenomenal. So I'm not going to try. I'm actually going to lean into the authentic answer to this question. And I'm going to go with two, because I'm a rule breaker, so I never pick one. But Ted Lasso, which isn't even technically a real person. But I think he's a metaphor, or the show itself is a metaphor for a lot of what we're talking about. And I think that's why it was so uplifting, or went sort of viral, because to me, it has like, obviously the workplace drama. And what I think is so fascinating is there's such a like nefarious underpinning of why he's even involved. Sorry, spoiler alert, but there and doing this job. And then you just come to see all the different characters' humanity. And then as you peel back the onion and you start to see like some of the dynamics, either relationships failing or succeeding, or parental dynamics with some of the players, that to me, like, that's leadership. Because when you understand what's driving people and what's motivating people, and you care about them fully, like their entire being, not just what they deliver or perform at work, it's such a metaphor for like, I'm like, that makes sense to me. Like, I get it. And so I find it entertaining, but I also find it like an enormous metaphor for what I believe the future of organizations can be, if we, if we attack some of these things this way. And then my second one, which is I know it's so basic. It's such a cop out, but my daughter, who's 10, Harper, I'm following her because she is fascinating to me. So it's one of these, like, I still haven't fully figured out her love language, but she's so confident, and she's so authentic, because she hasn't like unbecome. I love Michelle Obama's Becoming book, but I think my journey has been unbecoming. Unbecoming everyone else's expectations of me, or even unbecoming my own expectations of myself, and just being me. And she's not that. She doesn't have to unbecome anything. She met one of my male colleagues, poor guy, and he said to her, Harper, do you want to be my chief of staff someday? And she's like, no, you want to be mine? Like, it doesn't compute.
I love her. I
know you do. So anyway, I had to just be honest and say, I think she's going to do great things. She has the confidence that it's taken me 44 years to get right out of the gate. And I'm just trying to figure out how to not break her, because I think it's like honestly going to be cool to really follow and watch. So those are like my big obsessions right now.
Beautiful. That is so beautiful. What a great way to end this conversation. Lauren, I just can't wait to continue to witness the next iteration of Lauren, what's coming next, what the rest of your year is going to look like. And the fact that I get to have conversations like this with you is just such a privilege.
I'm
Thank you
so
for all you're
honored.
doing.
Thank you. It was so fun. You made it so easy, and that's just who you are. And I'm so grateful that you've imparted all of your wisdom on me to even be in a position to have a conversation with you like this. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll have to do it again.
It'll be great.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Warriors at Work show. If you are interested in learning more about what we do at the Warriors at Work show and platform, be sure to go over to my website, Jeannie Coomber, and subscribe to my monthly Warrior Playbook newsletter. I share everything that I'm up to month by month, as well as some lessons and insights that I've learned. I'm also interested in hearing any feedback you have about this conversation or future topics. So reach out to me directly on jc@jeanniecoomber.com or on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues about this Warriors at Work conversation. Subscribe, review, and rate us. It's the best way to get this message out into the world. Be well.